Dr. Renutomo welcome you to talk about learning in Constructivist Perspective. Friends, if you recall, then this is the third part of the series of lecture which we have been discussing about the constructivism. In previous two lectures, we talked elaborately about constructivism and how it is different from other kind of learning. Now, to go further, let us try to understand that why constructivism is so important and how this concept has been introduced socially. As far as constructivism is concerned, as we also discussed in the previous lecture also, it's more of a sociological in nature because it discusses human development. It talks about that how the knowledge is to be constructed, and as we discussed previously also, that constructivist believes that the knowledge is constructed based upon the interaction between the individuals or human beings. So from here on, what we can conclude regarding the fact that how it has to be taken, constructivism as an approach has to be taken by the teachers or by the students or by the educationists. To understand that, we have to understand that how this social learning theory was developed. This social learning theory was developed by Vygotsky, a Russian anthropologist who was basically trying to understand that what impacts the learning. He came to the conclusion that individuals are active participants as far as creation of their own knowledge is concerned. So that means that we cannot treat students as just the passive learner. So if we understand Vygotsky, then learners are at the center, and as a teacher we have to take care of their social and cultural settings as well. And it is not just individual, the student who is important to the teacher, but his social and cultural background from which the student is coming. That is also equally important. For instance, if the student is learning in the class based upon the fact that how he is interacting with the teachers, how he is interacting with the peers, that is also impacted by his interaction with the parents back home. So, the teachers have to stimulate and facilitate conversation in the classroom in such a manner that it is in the same line on which the communication, the knowledge transmission, or we can say the discussions are going on at home between the child and the parents. So, social constructivism suggests that successful teaching and learning is heavily dependent upon interpersonal interaction and discussion, with the primary focus on students' understanding of the discussion. One of the core constructs of Vygotsky theory of social constructivism is, as he stated, ZPD, that means zonal proximity development. That means he was basically trying to understand that how the individual learns or how that knowledge is provided to the student by various social beings who are surrounding him. So from there on he come down to this ZBT zone, that means the learner is basically understanding based upon that who are the closest to him. That means the knowledge transmission in case of social construction is decided by the people who are at the most maximum proximity to the learner. So accordingly learner learns. So that means it is also responsibility of the teacher to create that proximity zone, and so that the student can develop further learning. From this diagram, what you can gather is that how the individual is being impacted and how the objectives of the education are impacting the learning and what all factors are contributing to the learning. Of course, the socialization is there, and apart from the socialization, there are other methods like the transfer of learning is also there. Then there is also, for as far as student is concerned, he produces on the basis of socialization, on the basis of the interaction which happens in the class or with his peer group or at home or in the field or while doing the project or trying to find out knowledge on his own by using various medias like television or computers or the books he has at home. So, accordingly the student gathers information. So, all these have an impact on the knowledge gathering of the student. So, here who is at the center as far as knowledge gathering is concerned? At the center we have the student, because he is the one who is gathering. And how he is gathering? Because he is being facilitated by many social factors, or we can say many socialization agents. So, accordingly he is learning, and because he is learning, so the knowledge is being transformed into the information is being transformed to the knowledge, and that is being expressed either in the examination, when the student is appearing in the examination, or during his discussions, or during his reflections also, when he is thinking about certain problems. So, that way the knowledge of the student, the canvas is huge, because it is having many people, many factors, many situations involved. So, from here on what we can conclude is that constructivism means that human being cannot discover knowledge on his own. He cannot construct or make it. Rather, he gets it from the various sources, and on basis of that the construction happens. So, that means he makes sense of his experiences, he makes sense of his information, and accordingly the knowledge is constructed. So, discovery of the knowledge is out of question as far as constructivism is concerned, because from the constructivist position, knowledge is constructed by humans based upon his interaction and validated by using it in society and social institutions in which he is living or interacting with. That means, apart from the fact that what kind of knowledge student has, the other thing which is very important as far as constructivism is concerned, the social institutions. How, if that knowledge is on the same line on which the social institutions are functioning, is it being validated by the society when it is being used by the students? So, this is an important aspect of the social constructivism. That is why we have the weak version of the constructivism also, and the strong version of the constructivism also, which says that the student rely a lot on the human representation of the realities and construct the representations according to the entity or the phenomena which are being happening around him. And as far as the stronger side is concerned, they believe that they are not just representation of the concept socially constructed, but also of their own. That means the social concept is constructed as well as life is also being impacted. Now, let us try to understand with an example, like if the student has to understand science, then we should be taking the student to the lab, because after being into the lab only he will be able to understand that how the if it is the chemistry, then naturally by interacting with the chemical substances, the student will be able to acquire the knowledge of the various actions and reactions as it exists in the chemistry. So, without performing the practical himself, the student will not have the knowledge. So, teaching in the constructivist mode is collaborative as well as being facilitated by various other sources made by the ICT, and the teacher usually encourages the child as to grasp more knowledge through various resources and ideas, and as well as from the learning community, and accordingly come out with the knowledge. So, from the constructivism point of view, Teaching and learning will be a constant activity, one. Second, the student will be searching for the meaning, and again it is non-stop voyage as far as for the student is concerned. Then the student will be understanding the whole as well as parts. So, this is also very important, that the student should be able to understand the whole as well as part. Otherwise, the student will feel not so comfortable with the information which is being imparted. The student should also be able to understand the mental model of this based upon the fact that what kind of knowledge is being given. So, that means here the student will be have the knowledge from the different sources, and it is quite probable that those sources may provide him the contradicting knowledge. So, based upon that, student will be able to reflect upon and then come down on certain conclusions. And as far as assessment is concerned, assessment is also part of the teaching learning process, and rather it is more part of the learning process, because learning is taken collaboratively and through conversation. So, accordingly assessment is also being taken up as a facilitating his learning mode or learning process. So, friends, from here what we understand is that the teacher is responsible individually to each student. So, as far as ZPD, that means zone of proximal development, is concerned, that has to be achieved by the teacher. And how that can be achieved by the teacher? For this, the student has to be challenged, student has to be supported, and student has to be facilitated. So, the student should neither be overwhelmed nor be threatened nor be given any kind of an experience which is stopping him from exploring. Rather, he should be giving new experiences so that he can learn further. So, from Vygotsky point of view, the notion of scaffolding, that means the teaching must start with what the student already know and build a further framework which will support the further knowledge. And typically, this involves proceeding from the concrete to the abstract. So, the whole teaching and learning, the purpose of teaching and learning is construed in these lines. That means here the teacher has to be there with the start, at the start with the student, and help the student to build up his knowledge in such a manner that he can come from concrete to the abstract. So, that means the student is not the only one who is working, rather the teacher is also working. In fact, all the people who are responsible for making him knowledgeable, all of them have to be engaged in the learning process. In fact, that is why at times this particular model has been criticized, because critics says that it is very idealistic, because it says that as if that the student can be always be guided and directed to gather the knowledge, and in fact in this model the role of the teacher is limited. So, social constructivist learning theory allow teacher to become a facilitator only, and he or she is not allowed to direct the teaching, and the quality and the content knowledge at times the critic says cannot be controlled because of the fact that the complete control is in the hand of the learner. So, friends, now let us talk about another component of the constructivism which is very important, that is experiential learning and reflection. So, this concept, that is experiential learning, as the word itself connotes, is learning which is based upon experience. Similarly, the reflections, if we talk about reflection, then we have to understand that the reflective teaching learning is also decided by the student doing and reflecting upon what kind of knowledge he has gained, or he can also reject it. So, experiential learning means learning through experience, one thing. Then another is learning through reflection on doing. So, these are the two core components as far as experiential learning is concerned. So that means hand-on learning would be there as far as experiential learning is concerned. This also means that the student will be reflecting on the product of his learning. Experiential learning is different from the rote memory or the didactic kind of learning, in which learner is usually playing a very passive role. In fact, it desires the student to be very active, because it wants the student to be at the center and he or she has to act. So, action learning will not be inappropriate word. Adventure learning will also be not very inappropriate word if we would discuss experiential learning. In fact, it can also be termed as free choice learning or cooperative learning or service learning, and of course situated learning. So, experiential learning has been used at times with the term experiential education, but experiential education is a concept which is very big in comparison to the experiential learning. So, experiential education, whenever we talk about, it's more of a philosophy of education, and it considers the individual learning process. And in comparison to the experiential education, experiential learning is more concerned about the concrete issues which are related to the learner and the learning outcome. So, it is not philosophical oriented as the experiential education is. Experiential learning is more concrete, and it tries to bring the learner, relate learner to the learning context, and that way the knowledge is enhanced. Now, let us talk about, as far as this concept is concerned, experiential learning is concerned. Is this concept new? No, dear students, this concept is pretty old. In fact, it goes back to Aristotle 350 BC, when he wrote that for the things we have to learn before we can do, we learn by doing them. But as an articulated educational approach, experiential learning is much more recent vintage. It was introduced by David A. Kolb in 1970, and he had developed the modern theory of experiential learning, and he was drawing heavily on the work of John Dewey, Kurt Lewin and Jean Piaget. So, experiential learning has a significant teaching advantage. As the Peter Senge, the author of the fifth discipline in 1990, states that teaching is of utmost importance to motivate people. Learning only has a good effect when learner have the desire to absorb the knowledge. So, at the center of experiential learning is the desire of the learner to absorb the knowledge. Therefore, experiential learning requires showing of direction for learner. It also entails a hand-on approach to learner that moves away from just the teacher would be there in the front of the room imparting and transferring their knowledge to the students, but it will be up to the student how far they take that knowledge, how far they reflect upon it, and how far they are able to apply it further. So, it makes learning an experience that moves beyond the classroom and strives more on being involved in teaching learning process, student being involved more in teaching learning process. So, Kolb's experiential learning model focuses on learning process for the individual. Like if we want to introduce the students to the animals, then rather than showing the figures in the class or the movie, we should take the students to the zoo. The zoo environment will provide them complete canvas, the complete information related to the animals, because they will be able to discover, they will be able to understand, they will be able to hear, and also based upon that they can further read, and further their interest will be instilled in that direction. So, likewise, in a business school internship or job shadowing opportunity in the student's field of interest can provide valuable experiential learning, which contributes significantly to the student's overall understanding of the real world environment. So, friends, from here what we conclude is that experiential learning is more about real world environment. To take another example of experiential learning, it involves learner to ride a bike, the process which will illustrate the 4 steps of experiential learning. That means if the student has to ride the bike, so here he would be observing, he would be understanding, and after having observed, the student would be conceptualizing. After having used, he would be actively experimentation. After having experimented, the child would be able to conceptualize. So, that means experiential learning model means after concrete experience there would be active experimentation. After that there will be reflective observation, and based upon the reflective observation there will be abstract conceptualization, and that abstract conceptualization will again be applied by the child to the active experimentation, that is the concrete experienced, and based upon whatever changes or learning he has, because after having abstract conceptualization, when we go back, taking the example of driving again, after having conceptualization, when we go back we learn something new, and that based upon our experimentation. So, we would reflect again, and when we will reflect again, then again there will be conceptualization, and this process goes on so on till the child becomes good, or we can say knowledgeable as far as that particular aspect is concerned. So, this means experiential learning will involve certain elements as far as the teaching learning is concerned. Of course, it will also mean the direct experience of the individual. This would also mean that the learner will be allowed to reflect on the experience, and that independence will be given to the learner. This also means that learner must possess and use analytical skills to conceptualize the experience, and learner must possess decision making and problem solving skill in order to use the new idea gained from the experience. So, friends, on this note, I, Dr. Renu Tomar, shall be leaving you to join you back again as we talk about the same topic. We shall be talking about social mediation. We shall also be discussing the further concepts which are interrelated to this particular theme, that is cognitive negotiability. We shall also be talking about what are the characteristics of cognitive negotiability and why it is so relevant as far as the life of the student is concerned. From there on, we will be moving to situated learning and cognitive apprenticeship. So, friends, be with me and join me on the fourth part of the series of lecture on this topic. Namaskar, Jai Hind.